Because when you talk about discipline, there's obviously discipline that you have to do where you wake up and you have your responsibilities, but there's also self-discipline,
Yeah.
which is undeniably self-validation. You know, when you can wake up and say to yourself, I'm going to go and lose some weight and go out in degrees that's -5 against all the odds, I'm going to do it anyway because this is for me. That's self-discipline. And you don't need any other validation from anybody other than I have done this for myself. So
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone who are watching. Thank you for being here once again for another inspiring conversation with Global Sisters. I am here this afternoon with Abena. She's all the way in Ghana. That's why she's looking lovely and hot. She's joining
oh.
us. So thank you. Good afternoon, Abena. How are you?
Good afternoon, Rose. We're doing fantastic. And how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm a bit jealous. I wish I wasn't wearing jumpers and I could, wear short sleeves like you.
Oh, bless you. Well, the only reason I'm jealous is because I need you here in Ghana. Ghana is missing a Rose. So,
Aw.
yes, yeah.
I cannot wait to be back home. I cannot wait to be back home. I'm
Oh,
so excited to have you on today. I've been watching your YouTube channel and kind of looking at your story since you guys moved with your family. And I've been really inspired. And when I met you, well, when I read your profile in the group that both of us are in, I was like, oh my God, I need to have her on. So thank you so much for taking the
oh.
time out, your busy schedule, to share your story and journey with us today.
Oh, don't mention it. It's an absolute pleasure and an honor because I've also been looking at your YouTube channel. So, yeah, the feeling is mutual, sis. It's absolutely mutual. Yeah.
Thank you. So, guys, for those of you watching and you're wondering what is so special about Abena, first of all, before we get into the exciting bits, could you do us the honors of introducing yourself? Who is Abena? Who are you in short? Anything you want to share?
Oh, bless you. Okay, so Abena is a mother of three, married and completed by Michael, my husband. Ekol is his Ghanaian name. And we are a family that moved from the UK with the dream of really developing the next generation to become learners of today and transition them to leaders of tomorrow. So we set up something called Destination Africa after our homeschooling journey. We started really teaching our children about their identity, their culture, their traditions, their heritage, and then adding things that you wouldn't necessarily find in schools, like your
Mhm.
critical thinking, financial literacy, mortgages, empowerment, public speaking. We merged that together and then people saw the results. So we decided to just start some classes from there, which really generated in the UK. We had about 50, 60 families, but home was calling. So we came home, transitioned Destination Africa to Ghana, and it has just gone from strength to strength. It's excelled. We're getting ready to put something that's digital out so the globe can also experience Destination Africa and all the good things that come alongside it. So that's me. I wear many hats. I'm a homeschooling mom, and I'm trying to be the best version of myself each day.
Amazing. Oh my God, so juicy. And I guess when people hear that, they're like, okay, we know why Rose is having you on the show. They get it now. They get it.
I get it. The connections have been, yeah.
Exactly. But something that I love to do with my guests here is take them back to, because now you've explained kind of a little bit of who you are now, what you do now.
Yeah.
But I believe that we're forged, the person we are today is kind of created through our childhood, the people that were around us, and all of these things. So take us back a little bit into your childhood. We hear British accents. You said you moved from the UK. Were you born in Ghana, raised, so tell us a little bit about the young Abena.
Hey, Rose, we're really going down memory lane, huh? Oh, gosh. So the young Abna was born in the UK, raised there until she was about 3, and Ghana was calling. And interestingly enough, we came in 81 where the transitioning was happening. I think at the time we had real hunger issues because there was a drought and there was opposition. So it was quite hard for my parents at that time to make the transition, but they did it successfully. We lived here for a good 8 to 9 years, and the UK was calling again. So I then went back to the UK. I think when I was aged no, we lived here for about 6 years, and I went back when I was almost 9.
Yeah.
So after that, I lived in the UK predominantly for the rest of that time, and schooled there, really built my life there. So I was now more or less a Ghanaian growing up in the UK, young adult, as opposed to a Ghanaian. Fortunately enough, my mum spoke the language with me, so I was able to keep the culture, keep the traditions. Fast forward, I met Michael, and interestingly enough, he always wanted to come back home to Ghana. So I think I've done a whole 365. Ghana was always calling, and here I am now. So yeah.
I love that. And, for diasporans, sometimes, as you say, born in Europe or in the West, or either raised in Europe and who those of them that came very young, you lose kind of touch with the culture, the language, if you're not lucky enough for your parents to teach you, because you're here, you're trying to kind of blend into the culture here and not stand out too much. And so a lot of that is lost. A lot of identities is lost. And you were lucky enough for your parents kept speaking the language to you. And you lived in Ghana for a little bit when you were young, which I think was kind of helpful for building that foundation, would you say?
It was for me personally, but I've come across so many people who have lived in Ghana for even a longer period than I have, and have completely lost the identity. And it just goes to show that, perfect practice makes perfect, because if you don't keep in touch with yourself, your inheritance, basically, you will lose it. So it's very important that we're purposeful, we're intentional with what we do, because I've seen it where, there was a time when I was growing up in the UK, especially when I was in my informative years, I would meet people who had just come from Ghana, and we would be speaking tree and all sorts, and I would meet up with them a few years later, early teens, and the tree, everything, it's just disappeared, Rose. So yeah, so I think that parents have to be extremely intentional. It doesn't just come by accident, or it's not something that is inherent. You really do have to make a conscious effort to instill it in the children.
Yeah, and I'm really lucky as well that my mom was intentional about that, because a lot of people are surprised when they hear I was born and raised here. I only came to Ghana as an adult. So,
okay.
And they're like, wow, your mom did a great job. And yeah, she did, because that's what saved me moving to Ghana and being able to blend in, even though you don't completely blend in as an outsider.
They can spot you a mile off, but still, language breaks barriers. And I have to say, I'm not sure what it was like in Belgium, but in the UK, parents were highly encouraged not to teach their children their language, because it would affect their understanding of the English language. I'm not sure if the same kind of barriers were set up in Belgium.
I think in the early years, perhaps, but over the years, they know better now, because now they say do not speak the foreign language to your child, speak the mother tongue, because that's what the child needs to understand everything. And so they encourage parents to stick to their language and not to mix it.
That's so interesting.
So that's a good thing, because the science is to stick to your language. I don't know why they said otherwise, but yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, yeah, no, but yeah, please tell Mom I said she did a fantastic job.
I will tell her that.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know about, now you're into education. I would say you're into education, you're homeschooling your kids. But what was your educational background? What took you there? Because homeschooling is it's not a cultural thing. It's not a Ghanaian thing, from my understanding. And so you weren't homeschooled, were you?
You see, Denise just made that assumption. Rose is like, you were not homeschooled. And yes, you're right. No, I wish. I wish what Ghanaian parent in their time would have even thought about homeschooling. Absolutely, 100%. And yes, you're right. I mean, going back to my formative years, I went to your standardized preparatory schools here, known as preparatory schools. And, it's just what you did. You found the best school. Parents even esteem themselves according to the kind of schools their children would attend. You see, so it was the same kind of, and of course it was the education systems that I was experiencing at the time were very still very colonized.
Yeah.
So the curriculum and everything was as you would find it in the UK. Parents actually even sometimes sought a British curriculum based school or sometimes an American curriculum based school.
Yeah.
So fast forward, I went to the UK, I continued the same thing. My parents actually put me through private education in the UK. And then when we had children, the idea was to continue the same cycle because it's all of what we knew.
Yeah.
And I remember, yeah, we met a friend who their children were around about the same ages as our older two. And they told us that they would be homeschooling. And I remember, Rose, I was thinking, these people are crazy. Who stays at home and raises their children from cream cream to can cry, like from, who does that? Like, this is the time for your children to go out, experience the world. You have a bit of time to yourself, and you're just getting yourself back into a routine, trying to find your way in life and all sorts. Now, the difference in that is we had been teaching my son at home primarily a lot of things. So he could read by 8 months, he could speak
Wow.
by, yeah, there was a program called Your Baby Can Read that was recommended to us. And we would put it up in front of him half an hour a day. And then, like, within no time, we would show him images like, the word clap, and he'd be able to clap, sit, he'd be able to sit. And so we're like, So we extended this to tree. He was doing exactly the same thing. And then afterwards, he was able to articulate that. He was able to write. He wrote it too. So he was doing a lot before we started looking for nurseries. So eventually, we find a nursery that's recommended that we think is great. And we're walking around, we're seeing all the work on the wall and everything else. And I remember asking the headmaster, so what do you do to stimulate children who are either slightly more advanced or slightly more behind? Because, of course, every child is unique, they're individual, and they can't be all pigeonholed into one box. And I remember him saying, well, we have to stick to a certain, almost like a certain quota, says.
Mm.
So there's not much we can do other than allow them to play. And when they catch up, they catch up, or if they're too far advanced, then they will come back. So basically it was a one size fits all. Since it didn't sit well with me, and I can only do so much in terms of, once you relinquish that responsibility of your child's education to somebody else, you have to understand it's no longer in your hands. it's
Mm-hmm.
it's in their hands, yet, and you're having to fit yourself around what they're teaching your child. So I went back to this friend who I thought was originally crazy, right? And I said, this homeschooling, I want to know all about it. How is it done? How are you doing it? And it just opened my world. When I tell you, it was an awakening, because it broke down so many stereotypes. For one, it wasn't staying at home 9 to 5 from Instagram guy, teaching your child. It was experiencing life. It was discovery. It was learning about yourself, developing as a parent, the child teaching you about yourself, and just being free to really explore their gifts, explore the things that you need to work on. And I remember she showed me a seminar once, and the person giving the seminar gave a few kind of rules to what homeschooling is as compared to if my child was in school, which I'd never really considered in the past. So I remember they said, you wake up in the morning, the school tells you what time you wake up, what uniform to wear, what time you need to go to the toilet, when you're going to eat, what time you come home. And if you take them out of school within the holiday period, your child is a fugitive and you could be fined. And so he said, you're not really raising that child. What you're doing is you're providing a roof over their head, but you don't really know that child. And you'll be doing that for 18 years. And by the time you finish, that child is ready to leave. And it really struck me. So that was the first thing that struck me. The second thing that struck me was there was a day I was taking my son. So I used to take him to preschool, not even preschool, like to the childminders, sorry.
Yeah.
So I remember I was going to work, and I was taking him to the childminders, and he was running after me. So as just before he got to the door, he fell. He stood up and he said, Mommy, why do you have to go out all the time? So I said, this is the way it is, and blah, blah, blah. And of course, I was starting to feel a bit of that mom guilt. And to make it even worse, he said, oh, Mommy, dogs don't give their children to chickens to look after. So why are you taking you see, that day, I went to work, every single opportunity I got, I'd go into the bathroom, I'd cry a bit.
Oh, your eyes out.
Yeah,
My God.
I'm telling you. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like when I tell you that was a wake-up call, did it? It was a real wake-up call. So everything started from there. And I thought nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I started really looking into this homeschooling thing, how I can better it, how we can fit our lives around it. And everything just got better from there, you know. So that could be a whole conversation in itself. But yes, that's how the homeschooling journey started. Yeah.
Oh, I'm getting chills already, and so many like questions. And indeed, this conversation, we could have a part one, part two, part three.
So I'm here for you. As they say in Ghana, I did for you. I did.
Because, you know, your son was in basically daycare when he said this. Hello.
Yeah.
If you're watching and you're like, oh, homeschool kids, they're so blah blah, they're so advanced. It's like he was saying, he was, as a, he's spitting wisdom at his mom.
Yeah.
As a toddler.
As a toddler, as a 2-year-old. And you know, you just think, wow, they have almost like they have conversations with themselves. Mm-hmm. They have an understanding. They can perceptions. They can compartmentalize situations. And so I think even from there, the way I used to communicate with him absolutely changed. I would start to ask for his opinions on things that I wouldn't necessarily ask for his opinions on before. And a lot of the time, when he gave me his perspective, there were things that I hadn't really thought of. And I used to think, wow, you could be spending all these hours away from me, and that part of you wouldn't be developed, and I wouldn't even be helped. Like, seriously, we started doing a lot of radio talk shows, and we had one the other day. It was on African Global Radio, and as I was leaving, he said, do you want me to do a bit of research for you so that when you go, you know exactly what you're talking about in terms of, you know, homeschooling children, different perspectives. And he literally outlined, he's 12 now, but he literally outlined everything for me. I mean, when you grow as a family, there's just, sky's the limit. Sky's the absolute limit. There's family economics, there's children's entrepreneurship, there's them learning about financial literacy, critical thinking. There's just so much. Like, yeah, sky's the limit, sis. So
for me, you know, another thing that you said that I realized, and the reason why I decided to homeschool as well, is first, when you're outsourcing, and I love how you said that, you use that word as well, outsourcing, and basically taking the responsibility away from you and delegating that to someone else, to, you know, the education to someone else for your child. It's like you lose control, even if that's not the exact word I want to use, but you're not involved anymore. You think you're involved because you're doing homework with them, but that's just extras. Yeah. But you miss so much from your child's development, from just getting to know your child, that it doesn't make sense. And a friend of mine, or a colleague, when I announced to her that I was going to homeschool the kids, her background is in education, so she is a teacher actually, but she works as an account manager. And she said, oh yeah, it makes sense that you're homeschooling your kids, because you know schools were just built in the 50s, around the 50s, just so women could go to work. Yeah. It's not because it was the best thing to do, but it was because women now decided they were going to work outside of the house and needed some place to bring the kids for them to do something. And so the school system was built to create the workers of tomorrow. At that time, people worked in factories. Worked in factories. And so she said the school bell and everything is in place to kind of already prepare them for what's coming. Factories where every 15 minutes or every 50 minutes you have a break. You go and pee and drink a coffee. They built that in a system. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. Standing in line. All these things, they're done for purpose. They're not done. They say, oh, discipline and all that. No, they're done because that's what they expect them to do in the future.
Yeah.
And all these.
No, definitely. You know, it's so funny that you should say this. I'm going to go back to the animal kingdom again, because we always talk about this in our household. And what you said has really resonated with me. Even in the animal kingdom, Didi, they don't have a manual to say this is what we need to be disciplined. But without a shadow of a doubt, they know the seasons. They know when they have to prepare for, putting food away, when they have to prepare for hibernation, when they prepare for mating. Discipline is intrinsic. It's inbuilt, it's innate. So to say that you're going outside of yourself to almost have somebody else train your child to live a certain life means your purposes weren't necessary, other than the fact that you carried them and brought them into this world. But then whilst you're incubating them, you're nurturing them in the womb, you're, making sure that they're fed and everything before you relinquish that responsibility to somebody else. You didn't need any help with that because it came so naturally. It's organic.
Yeah.
So like you say, when somebody is now making another set of rules for children to abide by, I think we as parents have to really question and ask ourselves, for whose benefit,
Exactly.
Yeah, who's setting the rules? Because at the end of the day, somebody is benefiting. But like you say, I guess even before the 50s, it was for the industrialization of making everything work in accordance to the way that the orchestrator wanted things to work.
Yeah.
But primarily that child is a unique individual with its own talents, its own gifts. It comes from a unique family. How are we nurturing that rather than giving that child over to something like an outside source where we expect things to all fall into place? The synergy is going to be extremely hard for everything to work in the way that it should. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think as parents or, non-homeschoolers tend to think, why would you homeschool your child? Are you a teacher or are you well equipped? And then, as you said, before they went to school, we did everything. You as a parent were the first person to teach them how to walk. You were there with them. It's not the school. So the basic things about life, you taught them anyway. So why is it that when it comes to even more important things, you feel like, oh, no, that should be outsourced? I think it's, as you said, it's a mindset and a way of thinking that has to be changed. And when it happens, you're like, oh my God, I now see, it's like an awakening, as you call this, like, why did I think this way all this time?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you 100%. And then it's almost like you have to go almost undo the conditioning away from something that should have come so naturally. Because when you talk about discipline, there's obviously discipline that you have to do where you wake up and you have your responsibilities, but there's also self-discipline, which is undeniably self-validation. When you can wake up and say to yourself, I'm going to go and lose some weight and go out in degrees that's -5 against all the odds, I'm going to do it anyway because this is for me. That's self-discipline. And you don't need any other validation from anybody other than I have done this for myself. So it's self-achievement. But when you take that discipline on the outside, it's somebody having to always say to you, oh, you've done a good job. I'm going to give you 5 stars. And, there's just that you're constantly looking for. So it's teaching children that independent. Do you understand why you're doing this? If we teach both school children and homeschool children. When I speak to school children, most of the time, if I ask them, why do you feel you have to complete this work? They would tell you 9 times out of 10, because it's been work that's been set for me by my teacher, by my parent, and my parent wants me to make them proud. If you speak to most homeschoolers, they know it's them against the world. Yesterday we had a conversation yesterday. I said to the children, remember, you came in this world by yourself. You will be leaving by yourself. So make sure you make it count. Just do your best by your own standards. And other than that, nobody would ask you for anything more. So
yeah. I love that, from my experience dealing with homeschooled kids, it's like you're finally really seeing them for the individuals that they are. And I remember as we were talking, you said the way you spoke to your child even changed. I believe that you have to, because you realize, oh my God, he's an actual, like, not that before you didn't know he was like an individual, but now I'm like, oh, you actually know a lot of stuff. Maybe I should speak to you like I speak with adults,
And I think when you also realize that how you shape that, you're responsible for how that's shaped. So you make a real conscious effort to ensure that you're meeting them halfway based on who they are personally, their unique personality and all of that. So it's amazing. Your mindset changes. My husband always used to say, when we started homeschooling, our mindset really changed. Like, First of all, we're free. We're not confined to holidays, so we can only travel at a certain time, peak times where you have to pay the highest fares. And oh, my sister. So there's all of that, but you realize it's a whole mind change for yourself, even before the
Yeah.
children. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So that's exactly what I wanted to talk to, the freedom, because a lot of people see homeschooling as, oh my God, it's now going to be prison. I'm going to be with my kids 24/7. So it's, oh my God, it's torture. You're going to spend so much time with your kids. Like,
yeah,
it sounds almost like, yeah, prison. But actually, it is freedom. And that's what I have experienced as well. Talk to us a little bit about, because you lived in the UK when you started many years ago. How did that feel like? Because homeschooling, it's maybe it's a bit more popular now, but it wasn't always the case, at least not in Europe. Maybe in America, it was more. Tell us about how the homeschooling community was like at that time in the UK.
Okay, so when we decided to start homeschooling, I remember I had a business that was doing really well. My background is in hair and beauty. I remember my husband sat down with me and he said, "Are you sure you want to take on this homeschooling thing? Because once we start, this is it. We have to go for it." So it's so interesting, Diddy, when it comes to conditioning, when you've done what you always know, you don't believe the grass can be greener. So the day before I closed the business, I had the business for 10 years. And the day before I closed the business, I sat down and I had a really good cry. And I thought, so, now looking back, right, like, why was I even crying? But it's what I knew. And I was thinking, I'm giving up everything because you're conditioned, especially as a female, to
Mm-hmm.
believe that, yeah, you need to take your children somewhere and then you need a job, outside of that, you need your own space, your own life, and all of that. So I said, yes, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to, at the time, I didn't see homeschooling as an investment for my children. I saw it as a sacrifice. Now I know different. Yeah, now I know so different. So we closed the business, and there were, for just a short amount of time, there was one income coming in, and we had to just rejig everything. So we realized that actually, no, we're not confined to the social norms. We're not trying to keep up with the Joneses. We're trying to do the best generationally for our family and what fits us best. So we built this life in and around the the homeschooling, so to speak. And then we had to start to think outside of the box because that's what homeschooling forces you to do. So everything that I always wanted to do had started coming to me, teaching children, empowering mothers. And I remember speaking to so many, I've persuaded 8 teachers to homeschool.
Wow.
And yeah, 8 teachers who were teaching other people's children. I remember one parent said to me, "You know what, Abna, I really want to start I wanted to homeschool my children, and I want to start an events company where I'm organizing people's weddings and everything, but I'm not sure how the income is going to come in. How am I going to be able to subsidize?" Since she left homeschool or the school to start homeschooling her children, her events company has become so vast. She's employed so many people. She's bought properties from this. She's now got footballers on her list. And every time we have this conversation, it just keeps coming. So when we talk about freedom, you're actually confined to a system, which is the same as the schooling system. It's just the schooling system continued. They tell you when to wake up. They tell you who to go to, who to answer to. They give you a salary at the end of the month, which is almost like a bribe to say, "Oh, well done, come back next month." Yeah. But yeah, and then once you actually realize that, hey, there are all these dreams, aspirations, ambitions that I had, which I can now implement and then get my children involved. So moving further along, we also learned about family economics. So we did Destination Africa. My son has a business where he sells key rings with Ankara symbols on there.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter has a baking business. And it just all comes together in the family economics. We sit down, we have conversations about the businesses, we do forecasting, projections, all of it's just amazing. So I'm just like, if they were still in school, we would be living completely different lives. We just live in the same household. That's it. Dad is doing his thing at work. I'm doing my thing somewhere else. The children are doing their thing somewhere else. But now everybody's in touch with one another. We know what's going on in each other's lives. We develop each other as we go along. And then the question comes, what about socialization? Oh my goodness.
My God.
Yeah.
The question.
Oh my goodness, this question is just forever on end. But again, you can't blame us because this is how we've been conditioned. And I remember when we decided to start homeschooling, my mother-in-law was very, very against it. And she was, the children, they need to learn how to speak, how to articulate, how to socialize. And once the fruit started to speak for itself, she actually came back and she had to really like compliment the work that she was seeing. Because I remember at the beginning, I tried to explain to her mum, this is false socialization. When you're forced to be in a room with people you may not like, people you don't know for a certain amount of hours, for certain years of your life, that's not socialization. Socialization is when because when you leave and you go to work, you're meeting people from all different backgrounds, different cultures, different beliefs, everything. So why do we not mirror that when they're young? Why are they always with their peers? There's something very wrong with that. In no kingdom would you find that any species only communicates with people who are just their age. So it's actually working to their disadvantage. Whereas when you're a child, you're out there, you're free. You're looking at people, you're giving them eye contact. Your body language is right. You're reading people, you're socially aware, you're emotionally aware, and you're character building that child in an environment that is it's enhancing. It takes a village. So if it takes a village, why are they in a class with all of these peers that are all the same? It really doesn't help them. So that's, I hope it's answered your question.
It has, it has. Apart from, because you stopped working to be with the kids and then kind of your family dynamics changed, you not change, the way you brought in income changed for you as well, specifically. How were your friends reacting to it? Because, you mentioned your mother-in-law was quite against because that was all she knew. And that's like normal. How did your friends react and how did the kids react to it? Because for them, maybe it was kind of, had they ever been to school and you pulled them out? Because the youngest, tell us about that.
Okay, so the children have never been to school.
Okay.
I engage them a lot in activities with school children. So we have everything from piano, swimming, ukulele, horse riding, painting, baking. I mean, the world's your oyster when it comes to homeschooling. And you can also do it in times when the children outside of school hours. So I would specifically target certain groups and activities that I wanted my children to be part of. I would target sometimes adults, sometimes teenagers. Just tell me my child is not allowed to go to this class and see if I don't try to get my child in that class. So I was one of those parents. And I remember when we first started homeschooling, going back to your question, my friends I think one of the questions, two of the main questions I always used to get was socialization. How are they going to socialize? How are they going to be able to, fit in with their peers and all sorts? And the second question was, how are you going to ensure that you cover everything in terms of a curriculum? Yeah. So I thought, for the most point, I would explain to them, this is a curriculum that we're using. This is what we're going to be doing as activities. And then I would just leave it. Not long after that, you just see the fruits. I always say, if you want to, don't go out and prove yourself to somebody when they're questioning you. The evidence is always in the pudding. Yeah. And it wasn't long after that people really started to see results in the children, that they realized and they recognized that there is something about this homeschool. This is why I've been able to convert 8 teachers. And it's not just the teachers in homeschooling, because they see what your works, the fruit of your works in your children. And once they see that, it just speaks for itself, Yeah.
So this is a great time to transition into Destination Africa, because you started homeschooling your kids. And then I guess out of interest, people ask you questions. You shared, oh, this is what I've done and why I think it's great. And then you converted them, but you didn't convert them. Was that intentional? Had you already started Destination Africa? It was just like, okay, this is what I've done and it's working for me. Maybe you should try. But when did you guys decide, you and your husband, that you wanted to create a structure, something like Destination Africa?
Okay. So I think it was probably around the time my son was about 4 or 5 years old. And we would teach him things to do with, actually, no, it was before that. So our children always spoke Tree as their first language. So they wrote it, they wrote it, they read it, they spoke it. And I remember we would go out and sometimes they would meet Ghanaian adults and they would ask us, Apoleo Chi, does this child speak Chi? You know, has he lived in Ghana before? Has she lived in Ghana before? We would say no. And they would give them, they would give them like 10 pounds here, 20. So I remember one day my son was like, Mommy, do you know I've been counting my money? I've made about £50 just from meeting Ghana. Yeah, so he started like a whole small business from it. And then we were teaching him other things, like specific about teaching him critical thinking, question everything. Let's have a conversation about it. Don't just trust what I'm saying because this is what I'm saying to you is correct. I want to know your opinion about it, why you think this way about it. And, you know, can we better it? Should we change it? Should it evolve? So there was all of those kind of questionings just to develop him as a character and everything else. We used to do a lot of public speaking with him, confidence building. The two are quite close in age, so we used to do it with the both of them. So then we thought to ourselves, and we used to do a lot with other people's children as well. So we could see the synergy was growing, children were developing. Parents were now asking, oh, you know, you guys should start something. Maybe you should start a school. Maybe you should start a this. But I think the turning point for us after all of those suggestions were, our children are going to grow up sooner or later and they are going to be the ones leading us. You know, they're going to be the ones making decisions, major decisions for us, how the country is run, the infrastructure, everything. And right now, as it stands as a people, we don't necessarily trust each other. We don't trust the way that we can almost manage each other's affairs. I remember as a child when sometimes you'd go to auntie's house and your mum would be like, oh, yeah, yes, say, remember, can't auntie Sisi, you know, don't go and tell auntie Sisi our plans. But, you know, at the same time, you would go and share with a foreigner that doesn't look like you. Oh, I'm going to Ghana. I'm going to build my house. So there was all of that. You can tell a foreigner about your plans back home, but you can't tell Auntie Sisi you're building a house. Yeah. And when we peel the layers back, we realize that the education system and the way that we were raised didn't really help us. We were raised to trust something outside of ourselves. And so you come here, even now in Ghana, you see it a lot. Everything that's foreign is good, right? Is better. So, you know, if you speak another language and you speak the language in a particular way, it's better. Don't acknowledge what you have. Don't praise what you have. Don't value what you have. And so we wanted to break that from the children from a very early age, because these things are taught from day dot. And once we had broken that and they could see the value in themselves and have that Ubuntu spirit of I am because you are because I am, not I'm better than you because I came first in class, but because they did, you know, without this YouTube channel, I can't get Destination Africa out. And without Destination Africa, Dede doesn't have a message to share. When they have that mindset from a very early age, they're not in competition with each other. Everyone's trying to do the best they can to make sure the community is run the way that it should be run. So that's really where Destination Africa, where it started from.
I love that. I love that. And on so many levels, because you talked about how our educational system is just not built for that, but just the way in Europe or in the West, their education system was built to produce workers. It was kind of shipped in a way. It was kind of duplicated in Africa for kind of a similar purpose, but even worse, I would say.
Even worse is because, the labor was now extended. It was going outside. So,
even worse. And it's been continued like forever, even in Ghana right now. As you say, education is still built, you know, we're still learning about things happening in the West. And I always say, how is it that you know which war happened in Europe, but you don't know anything about your next door country? You don't know who the president is. You don't know anything about the country. It's like, aren't you feeling bad about that?
This is it. Yeah. But you're right, 100%. I think we've just been conditioned, even when our children are young. You know, I remember growing up in Ghana and I would constantly hear, hey, where'd you and you know, when you're outside of your environment, even if I was to go to somebody's house now, I'm never going to be the king of that castle, simply because I just don't belong there. They can host me as a guest and whatnot, but I'll never have the same privileges. I'll never have the same rights and so on and so forth. And it's understandable. So when you're leaving your territory, when you're leaving your homeland to go to somebody else's and you're we're faced with a lot of hostility when we go over there. We have to get to a point where we recognize that that cycle has to change, and when it changes, it has to be generational. They have gone to lengths to ensure that their systems work, and they have almost gone to extra lengths to convince us that when we're in those systems, not only does it work for them, but it benefits us. When, like you say, it's to the detriment of where we are. So I think, it's fine if you want to travel, see the world, but there's also nothing wrong with ensuring that where you're from is tailored and it's catered for and it's looked after. And we can't expect that other people are going to do it for us. So when we're doing our bit, when, you take your child in your small kind of space, your small environment, you teach that child about themselves, their identity, their value, their everything, everything that's going to give that child a strong foundation. And one thing I learned is all the other ethnicities do this. So when we were, it's serious. Like on a Saturday, you would see Bengalis in the UK marching their children to Saturday school. You are going to learn how that language is spoken, how it's written. You're going to learn about all the other countries in Asia, the food that we eat. This is preparation. Like this is that solid. So we even have our ethos is patience, unity, and respect, which builds solidarity. We're not talking about each one doing for self. We're talking about we're doing it for each and every single one of us. And this is how you find that these ethnicities will go to different countries. And before you know it, they'll be living in a room, 20 of them sleeping in one room. They will work, save up, get one of them a house. And the next one would work. And before you know it, you have Chinatown.
The whole neighborhood just bought.
So there's all of that. And it's like you say, we have to be intentional about saying to ourselves, right, this is what we're going to do as a society. We need to stop the complaining. We need to stop the moaning and the whinging and just say, even if 3 of us come together and just make a revolution for our children, it will catch on.
It will really catch on.
Yeah.
I love what you said. And I think a huge lesson here is because a lot of people think when you go abroad or when you're born abroad, if you want to thrive, you have to fit in the box of the Western box to thrive. So you have to go to the best private schools. You have to speak like them, walk like them, do those jobs, be in those environments. And so a lot of successful Black people feel like they need to blend in. They need to kind of shed away every part of their African identity in order to thrive. But what we're seeing here is when we look at other ethnicities, when they're thriving, it's because they were submerged in their own cultures while being away. We look at the Jewish people. They're Jewish to the bone. Irish people, especially in America, where you have people from all over the world doing their own thing, and they call themselves American, but they always have the hyphen. Asian American, African American, and they're making sure that they're holding on to that identity. But only our people, for some reason, feel like when they're successful, they need to shed all the Blackness, anything that has to do with Africa has to kind of be done away with. And I love how you said that it starts with the kids. And that's what I've made it. I think homeschooling has a lot to do with that. That you realize that if you want to change the world, it starts with your home, your own nuclear family. And I actually didn't even think about it like that. When I started, I just thought that I believe this is the best for my kids and for the lifestyle that we want to have, the freedom we want to have. And for us to be able to help the kids become the best version of themselves, we have to be involved. But I never even thought about how that will also impact, our continent. Even though I always believed that, but I didn't necessarily make the link. And so I believe that, that's the only way. If you don't, I always think as parents, we have the responsibilities to teach the love of Africa and of our identity to our kids. That's the first thing. If you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for you.
I agree 100%. And you said it all, you summarized it so well. I couldn't put it better. And it's interesting what you said, because what I picked up on that was that, we really are our brother's keeper. And we live in a community, we're communal people, and the language that we speak is almost not just intrinsic, but this is what translates into how we're going to move forward, how we're going to evolve as a community. But how we evolve as a community is also cyclical. So I remember we had an interview where we involved the children, and my daughter said to the person, it was Wodemaya, he was interviewing us, and my daughter said, he said, how are you going to build Africa? And she said, from when we're young, we're told everything about Africa is really ugly. Our skin is ugly, the way we speak is ugly. We have to denounce everything that we are. But she said, how do you plant an orange seed in an environment where you would plant apples and expect it to thrive?
I mean, seriously?
Seriously. I remember one day sat there, he was like, it's so true. Like, how do we build anything on a rocky foundation? Everything is about a strong self identity. It's as simple as that. And then once it has that rooting, it can then withstand any kind of environment, whether it's rain, whether it's wind, whether it's storms. In order for that tree to bear fruit, eat of that seed and then plant another healthy, seed for it to bear more fruit. So to really do away with ourselves, it starts from day dot, and it's funny because we're intentional about things that we don't even realize are subconsciously doing away with ourselves. So when you have a child and you give it a foreign name, and you're speaking a foreign language to, even in the womb, you'll be speaking to your language to your partner, and then you look at your stomach and you're rubbing it in English or whatever language that it is, and then the child grows up in this environment. I've lost count of how many people that have said to me, I remember when my parents used to speak in a language, and then they would speak to me in whether it's English or French or whatever it may be, and I would feel so left out. So it's like, I think that's one of the most painful, we don't even realize how painful. Wow. Yeah, it's deep. So what happens then is they create, it creates there's a word for it, but it's a split personality.
Disconnect.
So, yeah, this is it. So then you realize, okay, maybe then I have to conform when I go to school, and then I have to conform, when I'm at home. I'm two completely different personalities. Whereas if who you were was really valued at home, and then you said to people, you are uncompromised, full stop. That's how you get those Indian children that go to school. There was a boy who I used to be in class with, and I think his name was Kitesh or something. We always used to pronounce his name wrong, and he would ensure that you got that name correct. We were like 8, 9. He would ensure you, because he had pride in that name. Exactly. Whereas my name was Abena, people used to call me Abena. I remember I would never correct people because it was more brothalized. You see the difference? Yeah. So I can fit in now, I can be one of them, when in and of ourselves, we're just so beautifully unique. But then if you're not taught the value of it, you can really be convinced that the beauty is this, that is right in front of you. So you're convinced that you yourself, Kasano, you're not beautiful. So you do away with yourself. And I'm telling you, self-hatred is just
the worst.
It's almost like the elephant in the room. Yeah, you take the shackles off, and the elephant will still be there. It's not going to move because it believes it can't move. So yeah, we have to do away with all of that. Subconsciously and consciously, we have to do away with all of that for our children's sake. We really do. Yeah.
I'm so grateful for the work that you and your husband are doing. So take us through, you had the idea, you lived in Ghana for a bit, you're both Ghanaians. When did the thought come of moving back to Ghana? Was that always part of the plan? When you moved, how did that happen?
Okay, so like I said, Michael always wanted to come home. That was his thing. And I actually remember when he told me, I was brainwashed though, did he? I'm thinking, what are we gonna go do in Ghana? There's nothing there. Is the economy good? Is it evolving? Ghana's like decades behind. And I remember we took a trip here, it was 2007. And that was the time Ghana was really started to come up. The economy was doing well. People were trying to move back home. And I remember thinking, I can see myself in this, environment. So yeah, so we always used to give it thought. The children got to a certain age, and I remember Michael saying, you know what, we can't do this. Like, so we brought our children home in 2016. I think my son was 5. And you come home, you do all the things that you do on holiday. You do the touristy, all of that. So I remember we were leaving and the children loved it. And I remember we were leaving and we asked my son, so what's the one thing that you really appreciated about coming to Ghana? And today, I kid you not, I thought he was going to say, oh, when we went to the beach, when we went, all of that, exactly. Yeah. All that good stuff. My boy was like, Mommy, you know what? It was seeing people who looked exactly like me and people I could speak the language with. And that's when we realized that maybe seeing people that didn't look like him all the time was not reinforcing the confidence that he needed, because that's when I realized it was a subconscious thing. So it doesn't matter how much you try to make it work, and work we do. I mean, I applaud everybody living in the West. It's just not easy, and I think we have to give ourselves credit for making it work, forming our communities and doing what it is that we have to do. But to answer your question, that was the turning point where we said, I think we need to really start to think seriously about coming home and seeing how we can make a life for ourselves here, and also just doing something for our children whereby they can see the value, they can see I know this sounds it sounds so lame, but like having a Ghanaian president that looks like you, or having, people in authority that look like you. I did all that good stuff. So we thought, okay, let's come home. Let's see, because we'd been teaching the children about inventors in Destination Africa. One of the things that we teach them about is, who invented the iron board, the traffic light, the gas mask. All of those were our people, which many people I didn't even know until I started teaching these things. But to really put that into practice, we thought, we need to come home. So we were very purposeful. We came home again, I think 2 years later. We started to collect, now we were here as people who intentionally or had the intention to live here. So we would collect bills, how much it would cost us to live here, utility bills, that kind of thing, petrol bills, shopping bills, all of that kind of thing. We did away with the restaurants here, and yes, it was all about, we're coming to stay, so we're not doing the bougie lifestyle, which is great if you can afford it. Go ahead and you do your 5-star living. But for us, we had to sort of peel back the layers and just live according to cut your coat according to your size, as they say. Yeah. So that's been our Ghanaian journey. And so far, we haven't looked back. It's been a real blessing. It's come with its challenges, which I think we also need to just develop personally in life, and also to understand the system, because we were coming from outside. You're not going to know everything.
No.
There's how to communicate with people, even in the way that they understand things. Whether you're communicating in Chi, whether you're communicating, there's a way in which they understand things. So it's not really about dropping your expectations. It's about changing your expectations, because you have to respect they do things differently. So and then even with things that they can improve, customer service is a biggie over here, where we don't practice we don't practice that one. We don't practice that one. So when I go to the shops, I'm very intentional. If somebody doesn't give me a good service, I pull them over to the side. We went to a restaurant the other day, and this girl was just dragging her feet, and everything I would ask her, it would be like one of the hair. So she did it for the 3rd time, sis. And I had to call her to the side. I said, how long, what's your name? She told me. I said, how long have you been working here? She told me. How old are you? She told me. I said, your customer service that you've given me today has not been up to the potential that I know you can achieve. You don't know who you're serving. You don't know who you're speaking to. You're having a bad day. I could be having a bad day. But I've come in here treating you well, and understand that this is what is paying your wage. So please put your best foot forward, because you never know where treating somebody hospitably is going to lead. So I've tried to make the conscious effort that rather than going back and saying, they don't look after me in there, whenever I see it, I try to kind of address it, and then in the hope that, you know, things will change. But I think with people also moving back, you can see the standards are slowly changing in certain respects. So yeah, we grind. Yeah.
Thank you so much, so much for the work you're doing, because I can only imagine how happy parents who have moved back with their families and kids are happy to have you guys there, because it's
Yeah.
difficult. When I moved to Ghana, I didn't have any kids, and part of the reason why we left is because we didn't feel like we were ready to raise the kids there the way we wanted to.
Yeah.
And now we're coming back, planning our move back, and knowing that you're there with your family with Destination Africa, it's like, oh, we can do this.
Yeah, since you could do it and more, and not even homeschooling, I'm going to make it public so that if it doesn't happen, you've got people, you've got witnesses. So yes, sis, we are here to help in any way, shape, and form. Just let us know when you're coming and whatever support that you need, because we need that collaboration to really be able to help each other to stand. So yes, we are here. First ones, we're volunteering. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to tell us about Destination Africa, how we can enroll for the program. And we only join if we're locally on the ground. I know you have digital versions as well, programs that we can buy. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, sure. So on the ground, we'll be starting back up again next year in February. And the personal classes are going to consist of the traditions, like I said, the language, the critical thinking. Next year, we're going to be doing a lot of things like safety. So children would learn how to revive somebody if they've gone into, if they fainted, if they're experienced, if they need CPR, how to administer burns, like asphyxiation, all of that kind of stuff. So in order to connect with us, we do have, you can either go on our Instagram or you can go on our website. So the website is www.thedestinationafrica.com, where you can sign your children up. We are looking forward to having you. We have sibling concessions as well. Or you can just DM us in our Instagram, which is Dest Africa Group. That's DEST, and then Africa, and then GRP. And we'll be more than happy to help. We also do parental consultations as well. So you can contact us through our website. We're starting an online digital program that's launching in January. So make sure that you follow us, and so you can just keep abreast of all of that. And we have a mailing list. So we send all of this out to parents to let you know what's going on. The online digital programs are going to be about the proverbs, traditions, financial literacy, and entrepreneurship. So there's a lot to come, and we're looking forward to it. And lastly, we do have also a YouTube channel. So that's talking all about parenting. We sent a survey out some time ago, just asking parents, you know, what are you struggling with? What do you need help with? And the things that came back, my goodness. So if you haven't caught it already, then make sure that you catch us on YouTube at Destination Africa Group TV. That's Destination Africa Group TV, where we discuss everything from how to teach your children to be confident, to colorism, to favoritism, to single parenting. And we have resources in there as well that you can click on so that your children can fill out these questionnaires, and then you can build your children up progressively, because children aren't going to speak to you about everything, but these questionnaires parents have found so helpful. So tap into them, and yes, we are here for you guys, and we can't wait to meet some of you. So
yay! Oh, so exciting! I really love it. You guys go and check out the YouTube channel. There's so much for you to learn, for the kids to learn. I absolutely love your YouTube channel. The website, there's a lot of resources on the website as well, whether you want to teach the kids the language or any other things. There's a lot of stuff there, and I cannot wait to be on the ground and for our kids to meet, for us to meet face to face, to get them to
we can't wait either. So hurry up, Rose, come home. And all of you guys, I mean, if you're abroad, you can touch base with us online. So it works. It really works. We can't wait to connect. So yeah, keep them coming. Subscribe to the channel, and yeah, just connect with us. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and journey with us. It was absolutely amazing. And I know for sure we're having a part 2 when I come down to Ghana.
I can't wait. I can't wait today. And you guys, the viewers that are watching this, it is such a blessing to have Rose do this. We spoke this morning, and just watching her channel, the initiatives that she's taken, it's needed amongst the sisters. So guys, make sure you're leaving it in the comment section about how great and how wonderful she is. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the part 2, sis.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to the part 2. Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much for having us. And yeah, hurry up, come home. Your banku is waiting.
Hey, she knows what I like. She knows what I like. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time. Bye.
See you guys. Bye-bye.